What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Home Slice for our latest outdoors test. Now, before we get into things, I should mention a couple things. This is the first outdoors test. I know in the sequence of releases, actually, there's been a couple outdoors tests that got released after the scientific research paper was published by the Science of Sharp. So it would appear that I've done testing since then. Actually, I do part-time university schooling on the side of a full-time job, and I'm a dad of 2 kids. So I actually schedule out my releases quite a ways in advance, but I was so excited about the Science of Sharp article that I sort of released it early. All that to say, we now know, I didn't actually know when I filmed those other outdoors tests for the SE in particular and the tops, that the effect of dual grit sharpening is actually because there is a really large, like almost 3 or 4 micron thick burr that's formed by the 250 grit stone that's then pushed back on top of and aligned with the center of the apex and then sharpened by the stropping. And so there's a burr which is resting on top of the apex, which takes longer to wear away. There's also a slightly uneven edge, which in my conversations with Dr. Todd Simpson, he says you need 2 things to initiate a slice. You need a bit of unevenness and that may possibly help with initiating the cut, because you sort of catch fibers of things in a slice, and you need to propagate a cut. And so the thinness of the burr, where it maintains this 3 or 4 micron thick edge for a ways back to the actual sharpened surface, is beneficial for propagating the cut, continuing the cut, where in a slice, the unevenness of the edge may be beneficial in initiating the cut. There's also a possibility that the burr of the knife being realigned to the top of the apex and then becoming the edge itself, that movement of the metal around may actually work harden it slightly. I'm not going to claim that because there's not really a way that we have to test it yet. Anyway, I say all that to say this. Gone are the days where I think that dual grit sharpening will drastically increase the performance of a chopping knife. I have seen in my tests that a dual grit edge will last cutting a tomato skin a little bit longer, at least with my control, which was the K-Bar Becker BK7. It will last a little bit longer. Sorry for the change in perspective, my arm got really tired. I was shaking. So in my testing of the K-Bar Becker, it seemed that the dual grit edge in a chopping application did increase slightly the edge retention. I think the biggest place, if it's actually due to a sharpened burr, I think the biggest place where you're going to see dividends paid is in wear resistance. So I'm no longer doing these outdoor tests sort of to prove dual grit sharpening. I think it does do something. I don't think this is its primary application of where it increases your edge life. This whole outdoors test is not really a test of dual grit sharpening. It's more a personal pursuit for me to try to find a steel that the edge retention is so good, and a design where the balance and the speed and the thinness of the profile and the balance of thinness behind the edge are so good that I can pack a lighter weight fixed blade to work with every Wednesday and not have this monster on my side, and actually still have the same amount of efficiency as a larger blade due to good design, good heat treatment, good steel, all of that stuff. I would like to find that. I don't know if we will find that that's the case, but we'll find out. That's why we're doing the test. All of that to say, today we are testing cold steel SRK. Now, I know some of you are already like rolling your eyes at me because you're like, Gabe, that's not even an outdoors knife. I know. But there's a couple things I want to do. I want to test the edge retention of VG1 steel, and I want to use this as a case study to how much does the grind slope matter. In the past, I've really believed that the slope of your grind has a huge effect on the penetration and the cutting performance. But as we saw in the SE versus the tops, actually the tops with a worse grind slope outperformed the SE in many regards. And so this is sort of an extreme. I think the grind slope on this is like 6 or 7. And if you remember, I'll put a link to the video where I talk about grind slope up above my head. If you remember that video, I said for slicing, I find that slicing begins to get pretty enjoyable so long as you have decent thinness behind the edge, or a low thickness behind the edge, I should say. It gets enjoyable around 12. So this is like half of what is enjoyable. This is a combat knife, you can see, because rather than a swedge where there's some flat surface here, you've actually got a true false edge where it comes to a point, and it's not sharp enough to cut my skin, but if you were to try to baton with it, it would just chew your baton in half. So this is a combat knife. It's built as a combat knife. Keep in mind, if you're a cold steel junkie, I am not a cold steel hater. I know this is a combat knife. I anticipate that because it's a stainless steel and it's not designed for this work, today may be kind of miserable, but I'm really just trying to test 2 things. Edge retention, grind slope. That's it. I'm working in an area today where I'll be close to a waterfall, so I'll try to get you guys some cool shots of the up close, the river front scenery and stuff like that. But that's enough talking from me. Let's get into where we're using this blade, and I'll give you a little report on how I like the cold steel SRK and if it surprises me and does some things well that I don't expect at the end of the video. One thing that I will say right off the bat is that cold steel has caught some flack in the past for poor designs for some of their sheaths, and I've even heard guys gripe about how the material that they use for the sheath is so hard and sometimes it's aligned poorly, so the sheath actually dulls the knife. And I want to just give a shout out to cold steel. This is probably my second favorite, if not my favorite sheath that I have tested so far. It feels like it's not even there. It hangs at such a good level. It's not like the Tech Lock on the SE where this is digging into my ribs, but it has the click of the SE and the extra insurance to that sort of kydex that this strap keeps it in, even should the friction hold here sort of fail. It's cool looking, it's custom molded. I really like the sheath. So hey, cold steel, if nothing else, you're doing great on your sheath. I'm just trimming back a tree branch that's getting in the lane that we drive through, and I have to say that some people kind of propagate the idea that we use carbon steel because stainless steel is really hard to get to a satisfying level of sharpness. And I have to say, I am pleased, totally pleased. I mean, look at that straight cut, so good. Very pleased with the level of sharpness taken by this cold steel SRK. Now that said, not all stainless steels are alike, and I think that Takefu, who makes VG10 and VG1, this knife is VG1, and I believe this knife is somewhat modeled after the Falkneven A1 to some level or another. People probably, maybe that's a sensitive subject, but the Falkneven A1 is made with Takefu VG10, and basically, if you're not familiar with VG1, it's kind of like a low alloy, just slightly tougher version of VG10. So similar properties, a little bit better toughness, not as good wear resistance generally. Yeah. Cool.
There's some baby tiny wet.
Sweet. Cool. This week involves a lot of checking areas that we haven't checked yet for invasive species, so a lot of climbing through bushes. I've only logged probably about 40 minutes of chopping this week, so we'll have to come back next week to finish this test. But we've got a good start. I find so far that the cold steel SRK is indeed pretty miserable for chopping through hardwood. It's actually decently good for green stuff and smaller stuff. So I guess that's a bit of a surprise to me. I wasn't sure if it would be good at any of the things which I do. But we'll have to come back next week for the edge retention test to see how Takefu VG1 does in the long run.
It's in the eyes of my beloved. It's in the color of the sea. It's in the mystery that lay beneath. Oh, can't you see? It's in the lonely shades of midnight. It's in the warmth of company. It's in the wind between of the blades of green. Oh, serenity. Tell me, darling, do you ever feel it coming over? This feeling like a heavy weight. But darling, when it feels more than what you can handle, remember the King is the Prince of Peace.
Wow. Okay, so in a sudden turn of events, I found a large patch of things that needed to be taken care of on the side of a cliff near a waterfall. And I have to say that although my initial impression of the cold steel SRK was that it's not cut out for chopping work, I have to say today this was the perfect knife to have. It's really small, it carries really easy, and if you're scrambling up on the side of a hill and you need a convenient sheath and a small blade that's capable of actually working within tight spaces, it worked really well. It didn't chop as well as the other guys, but honestly, I wouldn't have traded it today because that's like exactly what I needed. So that's cool. The handle was quite good. I had to reset sometimes, but that said, I was on the side of the waterfall getting sprayed, and my hands, you know, went into the mud and stuff like that. So there's mud on my gloves. So actually, I'm quite impressed with how well this handle can be retained in your hand for outdoors uses. The edge does feel like it's getting a bit less enjoyable. I found on my K-bar that it got to be really unenjoyable with the dual grit edge, probably at about the 4 weeks of use mark. Like, it lost the tomato ability after the second week, but I kept using it a couple of initial weeks. And at the 4 week mark, like, what would that be? Coming up on 12 to 14 hours of use, it's like not wanting to cut stuff, it's wanting to split stuff instead. And this thing wanted to split stuff a little bit because of the grind slope, but when it was nice and sharp, it was actually working quite well. I find that now, after around about 2 hours of use, it's starting to feel a bit less enjoyable. So I think, hey, there is a reason why people use carbon steel. Additionally, I will say just real quick that this sheath is awesome, but this little strap right here actually gets caught by the side of the knife and jams in there. And that's not really a big deal until you're on the side of a cliff and you really need this knife that somebody loaned to you not to fall into a waterfall. So that was maybe a bit of a drawback. And I will also say, actually, that having a stainless steel knife, like, sharpening is not the only thing that matters, you know? And having a stainless steel knife does give you a certain peace of mind, you know? When I was using the tops, I would chop stuff and I'd be like, oh, gotta clean it right away. Don't want to ruin that patina. Now, of course, if the knife belongs to me and I had no intention of selling it, which would be likely if I had a tops, I would probably not want to sell it. I would be less concerned about those sorts of things. I will say there is a sort of peace of mind to using a stainless. When you look at the plant sludge on it, you're like, that's fine, it's not gonna patina. Wipe it off, put it in the sheath, clean it later if you remember. If you don't remember, then it's stainless. It probably won't rust, it probably won't react. And there is some value to that, you know? I find that actually that is a dimension of use that's valid. It's kind of pleasant, isn't it? Some days you think you're gonna have a run-of-the-mill day, make an assumption about what you've got, what resources you've got, and what you've got going on. Sometimes life throws you a curveball, eh? And it's quite nice. Today, I was like, oh, I'm gonna test a miserable steel on normal stuff, get it dull, tell people how it went dull, just another day. But ended up having probably the best adventure I've had this year, hanging off the side of that waterfall. That was real fun. So yeah, I don't know. Take from that what you will. Don't assume, you know, be excited and engaged with what life actually throws at you rather than assuming you know what's coming. Good thing to learn for me today. Ha.